Gentlemen, thank you. Happy New Year. And this is the first show of VCTV for this year. So, again, before we start, I think it's only just if I start with a little bit of housekeeping rules as well. If you are watching us from the platform of your choice, now bear in mind that we're streaming for multiple platforms now. I think we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, YouTube, of course, and on our main page itself. So wherever and whenever you're coming from, do help us out. Drop a like, hit that subscribe button, put all our shows in your calendar, the ones that you like, the ones that you don't like. Hey, we would love to hear your comments. All the links are below. If you want to get in touch with the panel today as well, that's a possibility. Come on board, pitch your ideas. This is VCTV by LATOKEN. My name is Terence, and we're going to start the show today. So today we're going to talk a little bit on the corporate side of things. To be more specific, it's basically corporate law. And today on our panel, we have two gentlemen that will share their views and thoughts on the topic itself. So in true VCTV style, let's have them introduce themselves first. Gary, this one over to you. A quick introduction and the companies that you handle.
Yeah, thanks, Terence. My name's Gary Fowler, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, a writer. I've done 16 companies, actually 17 now. And I've been doing companies since I'm 21 years old. I'm also an investor. I love artificial intelligence because AI is the new electricity. So just love it. I'm the CEO and president and co-founder of GST Get Shit Done Venture Studios, a premier Silicon Valley-based AI venture studio. And our belief is that, today in this digitally transformed world, that there's really a democratization of opportunities from wherever to wherever. But the key is you need to have that network and contacts in order to create that billion-dollar company. I've been involved in 2 unicorns. Click Software, I was on the original management team of company was sold 19 months ago for 1.35 billion. And also Eva.ai, which I co-founded almost 5 years ago. It's hard to believe now, which is closing in $1 billion status as we speak. So love unicorns and love breeding them.
Great. And good to have you on board, Gary. Again,
Thank
welcome
you.
back. Happy New Year. Over to you, Dr. Srikant, a little introduction from your side and also the companies that you represent.
I'm a corporate lawyer. I've been a counsel for the Forbes 500 in India. And what you see behind me is what has been either partly written or co-written or so on and so forth. So I'm here to talk about the investments that are made by the Forbes 500 in India as well as abroad. Thanks.
Great. Definitely worth the insights here. So for all of you viewing out there, again, it's time to bring out that notepads and take some notes because we have the gentlemen on board and they'll be talking about our topic today. So today we're going to talk about liquidation to raise capital. And I think it's only just if we start off kind of looking at a little bit on the legalities bit. So we're going to start with you first, Srikant, since you are a lawyer by profession as well, and you have that extensive background. Could you kind of break it down for us in terms of the definition today? So we are talking about raising capital and also liquidation. How do we start here?
He's on mute, Terence.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The usual paradox. I was speaking on mute. So raising capital and liquidation are two diametrically opposite terms, right? I mean, liquidation is something that people don't want to talk about when they raise capital. But in my opinion, I think the plan B that investors / promoters typically should be a liquidation. I mean, it's not a plan A of a valuation of $10 million, plan B a valuation of $5 million, or a plan C a valuation of $1 million. So either it's plan A, which is hit your numbers, get it going, or a plan B, fold and restart. So from that particular context, the law also is quite, it only recognizes the dichotomy between, or it only recognizes the duality between raising capital and not raising capital, right? You either go bankrupt or you survive. So from a legal perspective, I think what founders kind of take it for granted is the fact that if funding is not raised, so what happens? So what happens in a bankruptcy situation? I think an investor would appreciate a founder or a promoter who thinks through everything, right from raising capital up until exit. And it can be a good exit or it can be a bad exit, right? It can be a good exit in the form of an IPO or a secondary sale or so on and so forth, or it could be a bad exit in terms of just folding shop. We just recently had an example here in India where we had a company called Urban Ladder which folded shops and raised about $1.5 billion and sold about $40 million. $1.5 billion and $40 million. I mean, look at the proportion. So I think that's where the I wouldn't say the problem lies, but that's where I think the promoters also kind of don't talk, don't tell kind of attitude with the founders. I think that is something that needs to be talked about openly.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. Gary, over to you with this one. The thought of liquidation alone seems to have that negative connotation when it comes to the whole business scenario. I mean, what's your thoughts on this one, Gary? I mean, what the people over there, say in the States or even in Europe, kind of looking at the topic and thinking?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's the last topic we ever talk about in Silicon Valley. Really,
Right.
seriously, because Mother Teresa said that it's not about she never went out and talked about stop war. It's about really about pro peace. And so, if you start visualizing and focus on the negative stuff, that's what happens to you. You actually, will it into existence. And I'm not talking about from a metaphysical standpoint. It just happens. So what you have to do, and I mean, we've had to figure it out. I want to give there's really a third piece here. I've had companies that have had to pivot, right? Look at Slack. I talked to Butterfield directly. They were set up as a gaming company and they had to pivot and they pivoted into Slack. Slack was what they used internally, to be able to manage their projects. So I had to cut his, and I talked to him directly at Stanford University personally. And so, part of it is not think about, think differently. I have a company right now, one of the companies that I'm involved in, co-founded. That company is a company, she's an Indian founder. The company had to go out. They've been trying to raise money, additional money. They haven't been able to do it. What did she do? She put her head down and now she's got revenue coming in every month. Right. And so if you start thinking about, I've never gone down through ever I've never failed with any of the companies. I'm not saying they haven't been really hard. It was like taking my bike and going down the hill and falling off and getting your back skinned. That's what it felt like, but you got to get back up on the bike and ride it. So, it's one of the things that's critically important with the startups. And I've been through the .com. We formed a Click Software right before the .com bubble burst. Then we did an IPO when the bubble burst, an IPO. And if we wouldn't have done it, March, the bubble burst. In June, we did an IPO on NASDAQ. So if we wouldn't have done that, and people said, oh, are you sure you want to do it? It's a really bad time. Well, if you don't do it, we raised $28 million. And if we wouldn't have done it, nothing good was going to happen. And here it was sold to Salesforce for $1.3 billion 19 months ago. So what you got to do is you got to understand it's never going to be easy, but you got to think through it. I don't know if it was Twitter or Reddit, but one of them had gone out and actually taken Cheerio boxes and created like Obama O's and sold boxes of cereal. Seriously, just to keep the company going. You got to got to do different things. And I'm not saying it's easy. Listen, if you're going to get into this business, if you're going to get into doing a startup, you got to put your big boy shorts on, because nothing easy is going to happen. You know what I mean? It's not easy. It's not. Or guess what? There'd be a whole lot more, and 9 out of 10 of them wouldn't fail. But there are ways you can increase success. So let's keep it simple, stupid. What do? If you have a company, one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure you have runway. Runway is how much cash do you have, right? These people, I've seen companies actually get an investment. What did the guy do? The founder bought a BMW, leased a BMW. Now it's kooky, right?
Okay.
My company, what we did, so Eva, one of my companies, we went out. I started the office in a shared working space, costing me $500 a month. That's it. And at that point, I raised $7 million. I said, I'm not going to do it. That's it.
Okay. Okay. So your thoughts on this is definitely look at liquidation as the last resort, and don't kind of envision that, because that's going to translate into business.
If you go down through and do it, if you're coming out, now think about it. I'm an investor, and you're part of your plans are talking about liquidation. The last thing I'm going to do is invest in that company. Would you?
Right.
It's like getting into an investment. He said, "Well, I just want you to know we might fail, and your money's gone." So,
okay.
I
And to kind of ride on that story, Gary, thank you for that. And to kind of ride on that alone, I think this question is for you here, Srikant. Now, put this in a positive spin. If we're talking about liquidation to kind of get in a new investor, is there that positive spin through it? First of all, is there a preference that we need to look out for? I mean, could you give that advice to some of the businesses out there?
So I disagree with the fundamental tenet that the liquidation should not be spoken about at all. I think any prudent investor should be asking this particular question: that if I put this particular money on you, so what would I get as a last resort, right? I think that shows the prudence of an investor, and that shows the commitment of the investor. So I believe in transparency, and if a startup is not going to talk about the lowest value that we are ever going to reach from the amount that we're going to be reaching right now, or from the amount that we are asking right now, which is $1 billion, is going to be your money is secure. And a positive spin would be to say that, look, even if we liquidate, this is what my value is going to be. So I don't think shunning from that particular conversation of liquidation is going to do any good to an investor, because it is going to hit you like a ton of bricks later. It is not going to do any good to the startup as well. So I disagree.
Srikant, listen, I've talked to the largest VCs on the world, SoftBank, in Silicon Valley, you name it, literally. And I've never, ever, ever heard that ever in the Valley. It could be culturally different in different places, but I'm dealing with Koreans, I'm dealing with Japanese, I'm dealing with Russians, Israelis, Brits. I've never heard it. And I've done 17 companies. Seriously, never. And none of my portfolio companies have ever been in a conversation. So it might be culturally different, and the Valley's totally different, but I haven't heard it once.
But could it just be a word? I mean, could it just be an exit strategy?
I need
They say
to.
exit strategy is different, but exit strategy is not going bankrupt. I'm not.
It's not about bankruptcy. Bankruptcy and liquidation are two different things, Gary. And I don't think it's a cultural issue. I think it's an issue of prudence. And while yes, I have written over 150 term sheets, and it does surpass the mind of an investor. It does surpass the mind of a startup as well. Let me complete though. It does surpass the mind of the startup as well. A prudent startup would not talk about bankruptcy. They would talk about, in the event of a liquidation, there's a clause called liquidation preference clause. I mean, why do we even talk about a liquidation preference clause? And if you talk about SoftBank, name a term sheet which has no liquidation preference clause built
Yeah,
into
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, I understand. We're using different terms. Liquidation in the States means bankruptcy, not, you're talking about, an exit, right? So I think the terms,
No, bankruptcy was never in the discussion
no,
today.
no,
I
but I'm
think I
talking
think
about
the discussion was
liquidation.
yes.
Liquidation sometimes is a term used for bankruptcy here. So we're on the same page. I hear all the time people want to know what they're going to get out of it for sure, what the exit and liquidation preferences. But I was looking at it a little bit differently.
Now, gentlemen, if we lay out the law of the land and kind of look at laws and legal aspects from different regions, is there a major difference? And what do we look out for? Could you please advise on that? Perhaps, Srikant, we can start with you as well on this.
No, in India we have a very complex law called Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Unfortunately, it is called an Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code while it was intended to be restructuring exercise as such. So the moment you don't pay your investor, an investor can invoke has this particular right. So it is more of a resolution plan, and paradoxically, the law says it's an insolvency and bankruptcy code, but what the law outlays as an outcome is a resolution plan, right? Which is exactly the viewpoint which is different between me and Gary. What Gary thought was bankruptcy was actually the term of the law, but actually what happens when you implement that particular law is a resolution, which is a liquidation, right? So India has a very evolving story. I think we haven't. Nobody can claim expertise over insolvency and bankruptcy in India at the moment, at least because it's just 4 years old, and there are so many. I mean, it's only 3 years old because it's been a moratorium for the last 1 year. So in India we have that, and of course US we have Chapter 11. We have other clauses or other laws in other countries, but India is a very peculiar case. I believe bankruptcy is an abhorred term. Insolvency is an abhorred term. Liquidation is something that startups should be looking very closely and very carefully when it comes to signing up for what they sign up with an investor.
I see. Gary, to you with this one and your thoughts as well, I want to hear from you. When you manage some of the businesses that you are kind of looking at the moment, do you look at such angles of insolvencies, or is this all lumped up in the whole exit strategy? Could you comment
I
on
mean,
that?
the situation is I've never looked at, the thing is if they don't know how to manage their money, it's a entirely different deal. My rule is that when they raise money, they got to show me that there's 18 months worth of runway, right? That they're able to sustain the business for 18 months. So, this isn't an exact science, but the thing is the dark side of doing a startup is 9 out of 10 startups fail, right? I mean, there are ways to dramatically enhance the probability of success, but they do fail. And in terms of exiting the company, in terms of setting up with the preferred shares rather than common shares, and of course, that is something that the VCs and the family offices look at all the time. It's critically important. It is, the opportunities that are out there today. It's never, like I said, it's never easy doing it. I mean, I've had companies, Click Software, we had to do an IPO on NASDAQ. We had no choice at that point in time, and we were being pushed by the investors. So it's never easy. It's not easy now. I mean, you've got to think your way through these turbulent times. Look at the digital transformation now. If I'm a company in Africa, how do I do an IPO on NASDAQ? How do I do an IPO today? How do I get to those people because of COVID? How can I travel to meet with them? There's all kinds of different layers and that's why VCTV is really nice. They get a chance to be able to present and talk about these incredible opportunities. But of course, in terms of, there's always from my standpoint, there's always an opportunity. I mean, if a particular company has some serious challenges, what do? You go out and try to do acqui-hire, right? Where you actually go out and sell the company, but basically you're selling the people. I mean, that's the lowest. If I was in a precarious situation, that would be the lowest common denominator. How much can I get? 500,000, $1 million for each one of the resources that's inside of the company. So there are ways around it. It's always about thinking every single day, Terrence, every single day. I don't know how many startups you've done, but here we are 17 startups later. Every single day you're thinking about your way around it. It's always about how do you work your way around a particular challenge, right? Because the last thing you want to do is fold the company. I mean, I've had to pivot with Eva. I have pivoted 3 times because the first time nobody would buy the stuff. They didn't want to do it. You know, there was a Google-like search for the personal cloud. People just didn't want to do it. Why? Because Google gives it away for free. And so everybody says it's a big problem, et cetera. But when it came to open your wallet, that's why customer discovery is right. They didn't want to pay. Then I pivoted again to a consumer-based product, a task assistant. What happens? You know, Google comes out with the task assistant. So boom, trumped again. Then I pivoted the same technology and did for remote workforce management and hit it. So it wasn't easy. So, you know, thinking through it is important. And I agree with Terrence. They do ask for liquidation preferences. The key is it's, you know, what we don't want to do is talk about what happens if the company doesn't work. What do we do? If you start coming into that, I'll never invest in a company. If I get into it and they say, well, if the company doesn't work, what are we going to do? And they start working on those kind of strategies. I'm thinking about how can we talk about being a unicorn, $1 billion company? How can we put that truly into existence? And I know each one of the companies, Eva, Click Software, each one of the companies have had their challenges, each one of them. And both of those are, you know, unicorn status. So it's about, you know, figuring your way out of the situation.
Right. Thanks for that, Gary. And
Sure.
Srikant, over to you as well. I mean, what's the appetite like from our part of the region, so to speak? I mean, you've spoken to some of the companies and probably looked at tons of documents on your side as well. I mean, what's the majority like? Are they putting in the clause? Are they talking about it openly in the documents? Or are they avoiding it and having that positive mentality? I mean, what do you see in terms of consensus? You're on mute, Srikant. Yeah, sorry.
Um, Liquidation preference is generally talked about, but more from an investor's perspective, because the investors want to know uh, what amount would exactly come out of this particular investment, and if it doesn't, so you know, what priority do I stand in the queue of people who have invested in the company, right? That is what liquidation preference is all about. So unfortunately, everyone wants a spot number one when the company liquidates, right? And it's not possible to have number one. It could have a class of people. So I think investors are savvy about this particular clause. They just want to include that as a standard clause in the term sheets and say that, look, this is what we sign with everyone. So this is not more of a valuation where you agree on a valuation of $5 million, I agree on a valuation of $10 million. We probably meet halfway and say $7.5 million. But when it comes to liquidation preference, it generally is a feeling that, look, it's a standard clause and I can't do anything about it. Talk to my legal guy.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that will be the common go-to as well. And Gary, I think moving on to you with this question, do you actually need to liquidate to kind of restructure or raise capital or even to get new investors in? What's your thoughts on that, Gary?
you need to, can you say it one more time?
Yeah, the question is, do you actually need to liquidate the company when you are kind of going through a restructuring process or even a new round of capital increase, so to speak?
Well, I mean, so, if we look at liquidation, right? So
Hmm.
it's, you're either selling the company, you're liquidating the company, you're going bankrupt. So do you need to, like I said, I mean, in companies, we talk about equihires. In order to sell it, if we're running out
Hmm.
of cash or we can't raise money, what are some of the other ways to go about it? Um, so in terms of raising money for the companies, it is they're going to, all the term sheets under have liquidation preferences in, because if the company sells in the event of a sale, they want to make sure that they get their money. Right? I mean, it's a it's a simple situation. I think
Hmm.
that, it's interesting because you're talking about the good, bad, and the ugly. On one side, you're talking about if the company sells and you hope it sells for a lot of money. And I'm sure
Hmm.
Srikant's been through a lot of those discussions, a lot more than I have, although I've been through many of them. 30 years worth of them. But at the same time, they want to, on one side, the positive thing is selling the company. I mean, that's generally a good thing. On the other
Hmm.
side is, what if it goes bankrupt and how do they get their money out? So we're talking about two sides, the good, bad, and the ugly side of what happens. So the startups that are out there, um, they gotta, you know, I've always, every one of the times that I've done a transaction that a company's been sold or we're going down through with the term sheet, we talk about the liquidation preferences in terms of selling the company, not in terms of, at least in Silicon Valley, right? In terms of what happens to sell. But of course, it's the same liquidation preferences if the company goes bankrupt.
I
Fair point
agree.
there.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and Srikant, the next one, I think we want to listen from you as well. I mean, when it comes to that point itself, what are the legal and practical requirements that has to be observed? At least the basics. Could you kind of talk us through that point for some of the startups that are looking at us now?
There's a host of things that I've talked about in my YouTube channel,
Hmm.
which are called pathological term sheets, right? Or the paradox of a term sheet. So, pathological term sheet, there are certain key ingredients that you will generally find in a pathological term sheet, and a term sheet which basically says that in the event of a liquidation, I, as an investor, get 10x of what I've invested. And I hold the promoters personally liable for the investment that I've done. Is one of the pathological clauses that may not hurt you now, or that may not hurt the startup now, but will hurt the startup if the startup does not raise the next round of funds. That is number one. So number two that I generally say that startups should be looking out for is, unfortunately, there is a lot of haggling over the valuation. I think
Hmm.
let the startups think beyond valuation. Let the startups go through every clause which is there in the term sheet to understand what are the long-term ramifications of that particular clause. I think that would be a good starting point for a startup. Uh, Speak to someone who has written term sheets, who has been through the issues of a term sheet, who has been a serial investor just like Gary.
Hmm.
Speak to them, understand, look at this channel, and then make your decision, as in the startup's decision about signing a term sheet.
I see. Yep, great points there. Gary, if liquidation is not a preference, then what does or how much does an investor like you kind of get back? Uh, could you give
I mean,
your
liquidation
thoughts
is
on this?
preferences for selling the company. And it depends, it's about how much and how soon, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it is a preference. That's what you want. I mean, everybody talks about building a unicorn. The key is, can you sell a unicorn? Once you breed it, can you sell it? So
Hmm.
the situation is a preference. And so from my standpoint, Give me the question again. I don't want to go off track of this thing, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, if liquidation is not a preference, it's not something that you think about because you want to have that positive mindset in your
You
business,
know,
right?
but it is liquidation.
Yeah.
Remember, there's three parts:
Mm,
liquidation, sale, and bankruptcy. So there's three pieces. I like
mm.
the middle one. I don't like the other two so much, you know what I mean? Especially bankruptcy thing. So it's a positive. It's a term that copies both positive and negative pieces of doing a business. A sale
Right.
is a good thing. Going bankrupt's a bad thing, right? So
Yeah.
you're talking about the same thing. So it's really. Um, it's something you do want. Everybody that does a startup, the goal is, right, many of them, is to sell to a large company like a Google or Apple or
Mm,
Mahindra. I mean, to sell your company for a lot of money. That's it. The last thing you want to do is think about is a bankruptcy. So it is something. It's a good thing. On
mm.
part of it, right, is good. So if you're talking about the good thing in a sale, yes. If you're talking about the bad thing in a bankruptcy, that's the last thing you want to be thinking about. If I'm an investor and you come in and you're starting to talk about, I understand that this may not work. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Then that sets me off that they're probably not really thinking about how to manage their company to take care of my money. They're thinking
Mm.
about more the negative side of it. I just wouldn't invest, actually, to be honest with you. If you're coming out, it's like, it's like going out on a date with a significant other, and the first thing they said, but what if we get divorced? You're getting ready to get married. You're going to give her the ring. And she says, well, just in case, what if we get divorced?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's one thing about a prenuptial agreement. It's another thing if you talk about it right away before anything is signed.
Right, right. And I think we don't want to start the conversation like that as well. It's not a good way to kind of approach
Exactly.
things.
Hey, listen, I'd like to date you, but what if we get divorced? How would that make you feel?
Okay, fair point. Srikant, the next one to you. Say in a given scenario, most of the businesses out there, like I think Gary mentioned as well, not all of them make it throughout the years. So if they find themselves in that situation, what happens then to them and what should they look out for? Your legal advice here.
No, more than legal advice, I think what the companies need is practical financial advice. I think they need to work with their investors to restructure or recast, so to speak, their
Mm,
obligations. So I think that should be the first resort. I think what startups don't do is they keep on delaying payments. They don't
mm,
have an open and honest conversation with their investors about what state of position that they are in, and they keep on asking for a drawdown money on the investment that is already made. Right.
mm,
So I think an honest and transparent discussion is the need of the hour. So the moment you as in, I'm talking to the startups over here, the moment you startups are in a situation where you sense that you wouldn't be able to pay salaries for the next month, I
mm,
think that's when, you should have an open conversation with your board first and then have a conversation with the investor. So as to, nobody likes surprises, right? I mean, the investor would be the last person to take surprises.
mm,
So I think there is a lot of diplomacy that happens in the investor investee conversations where not, sometimes certain investors don't ask certain questions and the investee just says, since he or she didn't ask that question, I didn't answer it. So I think startups should shun away from the diplomacy which is there. It's a different thing to have a pitch deck, a fancy pitch deck. It's a different thing to be diplomatic about the obligations that you may have. So the moment you sense it, you should ideally, you as in the startup should be able to sense a situation where you don't have money in your bank account at least 2 years prior to that particular situation.
mm. Okay, so that's almost like the best practice, almost. Gary, say you are dealing with an owner who have gone through this process, kind of managed to get his business in limbo or her business in limbo, would you then invest or continue working with this person on the next venture?
What do you mean in terms of limbo? What do you mean?
That they find themselves in this liquidation or kind of rolling down the business, would you then work with this
I
person
mean, the
again or
thing
with
is,
the team again?
the key is fail faster. If you're going to fail, I'd rather do it faster than later, right? And so
Mm,
it would depend on, you got to look at the person. And each one of these opportunities is a great learning experience when you go through it. So, what did they learn from that particular opportunity and how did they manage it? So, I mean, it does happen. Listen, sometimes uh, startups, I mean, 9 out of 10 times they fail. So, it isn't like it's not going to happen, but it's really a judge of the character of the person and how did they do it? Did they do their customer discovery? I mean, customer discovery is important. Do you
mm,
know who your customer is? And have you validated they want to pay money for what you have? So
mm,
did they do that? Or did, sometimes they over engineer the products and they make it so you never get it to market. And when it comes out, it's too much because you spent so much money building it. So what were the reasons? Did they not manage their money properly? Did the market shift and they couldn't take advantage of the market? What were the
mm.
reasons? And of course, you know, I mean, it's a great learning experience. And yes, I would invest in the company based on the fact that they've done the right things and they learned some lessons from it. But it happens for sure, a lot.
Right, right. So that positive mindset is definitely going to help on the next
Yeah, I mean,
round
from my
itself.
standpoint, that's what it's all about. If you look at it, you got to visualize, part of doing, I'm a clinical psychologist too. So I can tell you that having a positive mindset, no matter what you do in your life,
Hmm.
some say it's a life instinct. The reason people survive in really bad situations is because they believe that they can. And so, doing a startup's not easy, but it's not about other people just influencing you. It's about you influencing yourself. And part of a leader, the CEO of a company, is how you lead. Do you inspire? Do you keep people interested? It's not easy, right? I remember
Hmm.
talking to Butterfield with Slack, imagine starting this company, this gaming company, after you're doing Flickr and all kinds of other things, and then the thing starts to fail, and you come up with a development tool that you had inside the company, and that's the thing that I don't know how much you sold it for billions of dollars recently, but
Hmm.
you start something entirely different, and I remember one thing Butterfield said to me directly. He said, it was really interesting because people didn't believe in me that I was going to be able to turn this around. And they actually didn't exercise their options for their stock. And some people, the smart ones, did. Now imagine how much money they're going to make. So, hello, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he said he had to trim his workforce down. He had to get rid of a lot of people, but the people that
Hmm.
believed him won. So it's that, from my standpoint, it's that positive, view, and keeping that mental piece straight. If you start in the negative, it's called emotional spiral. It's kind of like when you have water going down a drain. You can either
Hmm.
go up or you can go down. And once you start this down stuff, everything negative starts to happen with it. Um, so yeah, I mean, if they learn, absolutely. I mean, if they've learned and they understood the situation, they had a lot of lessons that came out of it. They had an idea that could have worked, but it just didn't work, and they moved on to something. And if the technology is interesting, and I believe in that team, absolutely, 100%, ninety
Great.
nine
Good.
point nine percent.
Good to know. Shrikant, the next one for you, from that legal perspective and the years of experience that you have behind you, could you kind of paint us a scenario, perhaps, or even an example for some of the businesses out there? I mean, give us a picture of a liquidation that went bad and what can be kind of changed or learned from that.
Um, See, I think the investors, including SoftBank and others, have fairly adapted to the possibility that the investment that they're doing would turn out to be bad, right? So they've done their actuarial analysis on that, right, which is the insurance-based analysis.
Hmm.
So what the startups have not done is they have not thought through this particular situation, right? They imagine that the investors wouldn't have thought through this particular situation. When the investors are pros, they know exactly what is going to fail and what is not going to fail. So I'm going to blame two people. I'm going to give credit to two people over here. The
Hmm.
blame is on the investor as well to not prompt the startup to not make an excessive expense, right? Thereby taking off a large portion of the investment that they've already made. So the blame lies on the investor as well. And the blame lies on the investee because they haven't thought through as to whether this particular action of theirs, Gary mentioned about the BMW, right? I mean, whether this particular action of theirs is going to affect their company. Is it going to affect the long term of the company as such? So I think the blame lies there. The good part is startups are now waking up to the possibility. They're seeing undervaluation of startups happening all around the world, right? Because of COVID. So I think they have woken up. Startups have woken up. Investors have started being very proactive of late. So they have started giving they've started playing very active role in the boards. Earlier they used to play a very passive role. I think now they're being very active. So this is the good and the bad, which I can see.
Hmm. Great. Thank you for that. Gary, what have you seen? Any great learnings that can come out from some of the scenarios that you've kind of seen or experienced or been in?
I mean, so Srikant is right in terms of I like boards that can actually contribute because they're part of the process and helping build the company. So I love it actually having boards that we can really can sound off and share ideas and help you guide the company because it's not easy and having their buy-in that you're doing the right stuff. I've not had negative boards, by the way, that have come in and really locked us up. They've really, from my own standpoint, they've been very positive. So,
Hmm.
in terms of lessons, it's this is about as I talked about many times. Steve Blank and Bob Dorff wrote a book called The Owner's Startup Manual, and I know both of them. Bob was the dean of my school in Russia, uh, so it's part of going out and doing the fundamentals. You create a product, go out and see if people are going to buy it. The job of that is the co-founders of the company. Go out. Literally, I would walk down the street in Palo Alto, California. I would go to cafes. I would take my computer with me or my mobile phone, and I would go down through and get people's ideas about what I have. Because the last thing you want to do, the challenge happens when engineers overbuild products that are not
Hmm.
saleable, right? They're in this uh, dilemma. They've got this entrepreneurial dilemma where they think if you continue to build the best product out there, that you don't sell it until it's finished. Well, the problem is they never finish it, and so you got to stop. You got to see, are people, is it interesting? Do you need to tweak it a bit? And if it is, let's get them to pay for it. Because there's one thing it's saying, I like it. It's another one for them to open up their wallets or pocketbooks and pull money out and say, here's money. I love it that much. So, you got to go back. I say, I'm a country boy from Pennsylvania. You got to keep it simple. Keep it simple means go out. Let's see if they're interested in buying it, no matter what it is, Terrence. Even if you got to do mock-ups, and I did that before, where I've actually done PowerPoint presentations and presented to people to see if they were interested in the product and if they would pay money for it. And it's just I use that as rule one whenever building a company. Check it, make sure you got product market fit, make sure people are willing to pay money for it. And if that's a go, then build it. And if not, you know, you need to rethink it a bit. Or
Hmm.
that's how you go out of business. Why? Because you spend so much money building a product that nobody wants.
Fair point. Thanks for that, Gary. And I think, with no puns intended, we are winding up the show as well. So, kind of over to you with this one, Srikant.
But is that liquidation? Or is that a good thing?
I
Is
don't
that
know. Let the audience be the judge on this one. So, Srikant, to kind of finish up the show, what would your advice be to some of the companies, either considering getting into the stage or kind of preparing for this stage? Uh, is there a good to do that they need to look out for, or what's your general advice mainly to some of the businesses?
Well, always look out for any kind of communication with an investor. I think the starting point of a conflict arises from the point that miscommunication or something was committed to an investor, and something that has been committed has gone into a term sheet, which has led to a situation of liquidation because there has been overcommitment and so on and so forth, right? So I think spotting this early on, catching this 200 miles away, is the key. So I don't know, only experienced people can do it. So talk to people would be my general advice.
Okay, there you heard it there, folks. Talk to people, perhaps get a lawyer as well. Gary, your words of advice for
get a
some of the
lawyer?
business.
Get a lawyer. The thing is, you don't want to go in because you get, when the legalese is in there, you want to make sure you understand it directly. So, I mean, I just all the time, every time, get a law firm to be able to review it, because you don't want to be, find out later on that you're the last person and you found the company that's ever going to make any money on it. Make sure that everybody's covered. And you want to make, so just that's got to be standard, right? So make sure that you get a lawyer, and make sure you get a good lawyer that has a lot of experience doing startups and that can really protect you. So that's it. I mean, you're in it to win it. Everybody, we're all out there to be able to make a little dent in the universe, to make money, to create the unicorn, to take our company global. I mean, that's it. So what you don't want to do is find out you commit to something that's so atrocious that you're going to just not going to benefit you. It's not going to benefit your employees, that it's a win-win, because that's how you start. It's all about win-win. How can everybody win through this situation? Because you know what happens, Terrence? The same people that I meet doing one company are the same people that are my investors in another company, because they trust you. They know that you've got the right stuff to be able to build a company, and they'll take money out of their pocket. I mean, literally, they'll take money out of their pocket, and you don't even have to get, rarely even do presentations for them. And if you do, it's light versions of them, because they trust. It's all about trust.
Hmm. Yep, great advice there, Gary. And for those listening in and joining us from wherever you are, again, I think we could sum up this show in a way by saying basically talk to people, which means get a lawyer. So, no unsolicited advice coming from us or any of your buddies or friends and all. When you are in business, I think the legalities need to be taken a look at, and everything needs to be down on paper, especially when you're dealing with investors, people's money, and the works. So, with that, again, I'm just going to go around to our panel again just to kind of thank them and have them say a little bit of their goodbyes to you. So, Srikant, is there any other things you want to say, you want to plug? This is the time to do it.
God bless, and stay safe, and stay safe health-wise as well as term sheet-wise. That would be my parting thoughts.
Nice. Thank you, Srikant. Gary, final
Yeah,
words.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an incredible time, and companies need to go global. And this digital transformation that's happened almost a year now, and coming online, the VCTVs of the world, to be able to bring those investors and startups closer together. So now's the time. Think differently about it. We use Silicon Valley as a port to the rest of the world. So if I want to raise money from anywhere, many times I'll do it there. So I've raised it from Japan, from China, Russia, you name it, actually, European Union. So don't look on the negative, look on the positive side of it. Get a good lawyer. When you're building whatever you do, you want to make sure everybody's on the same page. And it's a matter of, you need to look at yourself in the mirror. You need to be able to pull yourself up. You mean as a co-founder, you need to be able to manage your teams properly, manage your financials, make sure you got plenty of runway out there. And just, it's about, a pivot is not about failure. A pivot is just like going down the road and saying, I made the wrong turn and I need to make a U-turn to be able to correct it. So don't look at it as a failure, look at it as a positive. That's what life's all about, being able to pivot and move in the right direction.
Great word of advice. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for your thoughts and insight on today's show. Ladies and gentlemen out there, thank you for tuning in and thank you for watching us. And as always, goodbye.